Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Once her rich father married an evil stepmother. She settled in the house with her 2 daughters. Their faces were beautiful and white, but their hearts were evil and cruel. And then came a difficult time for the poor girl. From morning until late in the evening, they forced her to do dirty work, carry water, heat the stove, cook food, wash dishes, and do laundry. And besides, the half-sisters did their best to upset her as much as possible. They mocked her, poured peas and wheat into the ashes, and she had to sit and pick them out. In the evening, when she was tired of work, she had to go to bed not in bed, but on the floor, next to the stove. And because she was always in ash, dust, and dirty, the sisters called her Cinderella. But then it happened one day that the king started a feast, which was supposed to last for 3 whole days, and called all the beautiful girls of the country to the holiday so that his son could choose a bride for himself. When the 2 named sisters learned that they, too, could come to the feast, they instantly began to dress up and preen. Cinderella also wanted to go dancing, but her stepmother did not let her go, because she had no dress or shoes, and she was dirty. And then the evil stepmother poured a bowl of wheat into the ashes and said that if Cinderella collected it in 2 hours, then she could go with her sisters. Cinderella went out into the garden and cried. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds. They swooped down on the ash and began to peck, and so they chose all the grains in a bowl. In less than an hour, they finished their work, and everyone flew back. Cinderella brought a bowl to her stepmother, began to rejoice, thinking that she could go to the feast. But her stepmother would not let her in any way. She turned her back on Cinderella and hurried with her 2 daughters to the ball. When there was no one left at home, Cinderella sat down on the floor and cried with grief. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds, and they threw off their dress and shoes shiny and all in gold. She quickly put on this dress and came to the bride. They saw her stepsisters and stepmother and thought that it must be some strange princess, she was so beautiful in her golden dress. It never occurred to them that it was Cinderella. The prince came out to meet her, took her hand, and they began to dance. And he liked Cinderella so much that he did not want to dance with any other girl. She danced until the evening and wanted to return home, but the prince asked her to see her off. He wanted to know whose beautiful girl this is, and where she lives. But Cinderella ran away from him and climbed onto the dovecot. The prince ordered to destroy the dovecot, but there was no one in it. And nowhere near could he find his beautiful stranger. No one could have guessed that Cinderella was rescued by pigeons that took her home. The prince was upset and went to the palace with his head down. And suddenly he saw a shoe, lifted it up. It was so small and elegant and all of pure gold. The prince guessed that when Cinderella ran away from him, the shoe from her left foot remained on one of the steps. The prince was delighted and ordered to find the mistress of this shoe, and to whom it suits he will marry that one. The parents returned from the ball. They saw that Cinderella was asleep in her shirt on ash, and a dim light was on by the stove. Both sisters went to their rooms, hoping that tomorrow they would be lucky enough to put on the golden slipper. The next day, the prince came to their house, and said that everyone who wants to try on the shoe of his future wife should come out. 2 sisters came out, and the stepmother locked Cinderella in the house and did not let her out. The older sister tried it on a small shoe. The younger sister tried it on the shoe as great. The prince was about to leave, but Cinderella climbed out of the window and ran out to him. And she put on a shoe, and it just fit her. The prince looked into her eyes and recognized in her the very beautiful girl with whom he danced. He took Cinderella, put her on a horse and rode off to play a wedding with her. And he ordered the sisters and stepmother to be locked in their house and never let them out of there. This is how they were punished for their malice and deceit. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 12 beautiful daughters. They all lived together in a large and beautiful room. The king was very fond of princesses and raised them in severity. When the daughters went to bed, he closed their door with a key. But every morning something strange happened. When the princesses left the room, their shoes were so ruined as if they had been dancing all night long. The king had to buy new shoes for his daughters every day. No one could solve the riddle of the princesses. Once the king promised to marry one of his daughters if someone would solve the mystery of the shoes. In addition, the winner will become the king's heir. But the daredevil has only 3 days and 3 nights for this, otherwise he will be executed. Many young men of the kingdom, as well as foreign princes, came to try their luck. Day and night they guarded the doors of the 12 princesses' bedroom. But none of them could solve this riddle. And so, another young man decided to try his luck. On the way to the palace, he met an old grandmother.
Hello.
She was very hungry and asked for a piece of bread. The young man gave the old woman all his food. Grandmother was very happy because no one had ever been so kind to her. As a token of gratitude, she presented the young man with a magic cloak that made the one who wears it invisible.
Cool.
In addition, the old woman ordered not to drink anything that the princesses would give. The young man thanked her and went to the castle. When the young man arrived, the king greeted him with joy and led him to the princess's room. The young man began to guard their door. Towards evening, the older sister offered him a glass of wine. The boy on the way was very hungry and thirsty. He forgot about the words of the old grandmother and drank from the glass without hesitation. Soon he felt sleepy and fell asleep. The young man slept all night, and when he woke up it was already morning. He realized that the princess had put sleeping pills in his glass. And then the young man remembered the words of the old woman. Towards evening, the youngest sister offered him a glass of wine. But this time he was careful. The young man took the glass and thanked the princess. When she left, he poured the wine into a vase nearby. When night fell, the young man put on his magic cloak and immediately became invisible. He quietly walked into the princess room and saw that all the princesses were wearing their best ball gowns. Then they went to the wall and began to listen if the young man was sleeping. The young man played along with them and began to snore softly. When the girls were convinced that he was asleep, the older sister moved her bed. At the same place, a secret entrance opened, and the princesses began to descend into it. The young man followed them. When the steps ended, they found themselves in an amazing forest. The leaves on the trees were pure gold. The young man took one twig with him and continued to follow the princesses. After a long journey, they stopped by the lake. There the girls were already waiting for 12 handsome princes in their boats. When the princesses boarded their boats, the invisible youth also jumped into one of them. The princes transported them across the river, and they ended up at a huge, beautiful castle. Beautiful music sounded from it. Entering the castle, the princesses began to dance. They danced relentlessly all night long. Of course, this made their shoes unusable. In the morning, the princesses sailed on boats back to the side of the house. They walked through the woods again, and up the long stairs to their room. The young man was happy that he had solved the riddle of the shoes of the 12 princesses. Soon the king appeared to the young man. The young man told him everything he saw.
No.
The king at first did not believe him, but he showed a golden twig from a magic tree. The king realized that the young man was telling the truth and kept his promise. He allowed the young man to marry any of the 12 princesses. The young man chose the youngest sister because they fell in love at first sight. After some time, the young man and the young princess got married. And they lived happily ever after.